So, morning, everyone. Those who are joining us live, it's always lovely to have you. And those who are listening later, it's so lovely for you to be able to be part of this and for you to be part of our extended community. Yeah, I think if we can just pause for a moment and just take a couple of breaths and just drop into your body and just notice what the weather's like in there. That's a term we often use for mindfulness, just to gauge what we are. Don't have to identify feelings or thoughts or anything like that. It's just identifying what the weather's like for us, whether it's calm, whether it's stormy, whether it's agitated, whether it's dark and somber, whether it feels bright, and just to take a few breaths as we settle into this and just gauge what your weather is like this morning. And just like the weather, there's no right or wrong. We all love the sunny, calm days, but we know that there has to be the stormy and dark days too. And once you've just had a moment just to assess what your weather's like, perhaps you'd like to put a few words, 2 or 3 words in the chat about how you find yourself today. You don't have to, but it's always lovely to bring together our community. And I'm just noticing what the weather feels like for you today. So for me, the weather in the last 10 days has been unsettled. There's been patches of lots of sunshine, and it's been a wonderful time, but it's also been a stormy, tumultuous time. And I just thought I'd share the story because it's quite a significant one for me and our family around our car last 10 days ago. So last week we were in Bloemfontein for the week for our daughter's interprovincial hockey tournament, which was great. But on the weekend before that was the Hilton Michaelhouse rugby and hockey derby day. And at the end of the day, our car was mistakenly taken by someone else, thinking it was his car, and our little boy Finn had left the keys in the car because he'd gone to the car to go and get changed, and then he couldn't find the key. And so he'd phoned me from the car to say, Mum, I can't find the key. And I said, well, we're leaving in about half an hour's time. And so don't worry, we'll find it when we come back, when we come to the car. And when we came to the car, we didn't find it or the car. And so we looked around desperately. It was the most bizarre thing to have lost a car and for it to have been stolen at an event like that. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, we figured out that it actually had been, there was one, by the end of the evening, there's one other Land Cruiser left, and we did a number plate search on that and figured out it was actually a friend of ours who's owned the car. And so we realized that he probably had thought it was his car, which wasn't parked that far away. And so we phoned him to say, I've got bad news for you. And before we could even say that, he said, no, well, I've got bad news. And we said, what's your bad news? He said, I've just had a head-on collision and I've written off my car. And he said, no, well, the bad news from our side is that's not your car, that's our car. Your car is still sitting here in at my class, and that's our car. Anyway, so it's been, thankfully, everyone was okay. There was no one who had any severe injuries in his car or the other car. But it's been a really unsettled time kind of for me, because there's a lot of feelings and thoughts that have come up around, and this is so interesting from the mindfulness perspective to notice the attachment and the judgment, like the not letting it happen. And we often talk about in mindfulness how we have our judging mind, which says, instead of just allowing it to happen, it's happened, and now we have to move on from it and learn from it and deal with it. There's a part that says, if only, why couldn't, why shouldn't? And I know that this last month seems to be an intense time for all of us. I know certain families have had a huge amount of trauma and sadness, people struggling with all sorts of injuries and illnesses and things. And so it just feels sometimes like it's quite tumultuous out there. And so our practice today is all about our anchors and what can anchor us when the world around us feels so tumultuous. And it was last week on Friday, was the full moon and winter solstice, which is quite auspicious to have a full moon on the winter solstice. For the northern hemisphere, it would have been a full moon on a summer solstice, which would have made it a very, very incredibly bright and kind of luminous day, to have the longest day, the most sunlight, and then the most moonlight. But for us, it was the shortest day, but also a very powerful moon. And I think that's why I've so loved moon gazing and stargazing, because it is such an anchor for me. It anchors me to where we are in the moon cycle, anchors me to nature, how it reminds me how things are always changing, how the sky looks different every night. And just being in nature, even just walking barefoot on the grass or being outside, just looking at plants and trees in our garden or in a park or in nature. Certainly for those of us in South Africa or living in South Africa, we know how powerful being in the bush can be. It's a real anchor for us to just really ground. And so I really encourage us at this time of tumultuousness just to really to be in nature when we need an anchor. And the practice that we're going to do today is all around just anchoring into different points in our bodies and in our mindfulness practice. Other practices, and maybe you want to reflect on this for yourselves, can also be anchors in our life, like having a cup of tea. I know for our family, that's a real anchor. We've got a saying that where there's tea, there's hope. And so having a cup of tea can be a real anchor and help us to ground and help us to calm in the storm. And so I encourage you to reflect on sorry, I'm just going to have to move. The sun has now come up and isn't straight in my face. What are the anchors for you that you can turn to in life as we do this practice? And if you want to type anything in the chat and share what's an anchor for you, it would be lovely to hear from you. I'm just going to rearrange myself slightly. Okay. I invite you just to, again, tap into your breath and take a few breaths. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose or mouth. And as you do so, either closing your eyes or just dropping your gaze in front of you. And following each breath, especially the exhale, and noticing how each exhale invites us to ground into our body. And just finding a posture or position that's comfortable for you, maybe moving and shifting, stretching into little certain areas, moving other areas, just coming to a position that's alert yet easeful, that's relaxed but awake. And then allowing your attention to drop to our first anchor, which is our feet. Allowing it to draw us below the tumultuousness of what is going on in our heads and our minds in the outside world. And almost tracking down to our feet like we might follow an anchor from a boat. And settling into our feet as they rest on the seabed, on the floor, on the earth. And just feeling into these anchors with a curious intention. Noticing where they meet the earth, or your shoes, slippers. Noticing points of contact with the floor. Sensing into the grounding that they provide us. The deep anchoring. And if your thoughts start to drift and move away, just guiding them back to this anchor. And then slowly allowing your attention to drift up through your legs, your calves, your knees, your thighs, into your pelvis, your pelvic bowl. Noticing how your legs and thighs, your pelvis rests upon the cushion or seat, chair. Just feeling into the strength and security that this anchor provides for you. Noticing the points of connection between the cushion or seat. Feeling into the strength and support of the spine and the softness of the belly. Noticing if there are any feelings of holding on, of tension or tightness. And if there are, just inviting the breath to that area. Just breathing in and out. allowing a dropping into this anchor. And then drifting up to your hands, noticing where they are, perhaps resting in your lap, perhaps touching each other, perhaps relaxed by your side or cupped. And just feeling into your hands, palms, and just going through each finger, noticing how they feel. Again, if thoughts start to drift or get swept away, just guiding them back to this anchor of your hands. Just being fully present with your hands. Noticing even the spaces between the fingers, the space in the palm, the space around the hands. And then again, allowing your attention to move, to drift, to move up to the breath. Noticing it as it moves in and out of your nostrils, in and out of your chest, in and out of your belly. And just finding an anchor point here, one that you would like to focus on for the next few breaths. Noticing the rise and fall of the breath. The taking in and the letting go. When the mind wanders, just guiding it back to the next breath. And then letting go of the breath as an anchor and allowing your attention and awareness just to expand, to take in your whole body sitting here, resting, breathing, grounding. And to feel into which of the anchors calls to you the most. And just to settle one last time with that anchor. Knowing that just with a few breaths, whatever we're doing during the day, however we're feeling, we can drop down to this anchor. That we can use it to ground us in the busyness and the tumultuousness of life. That we can come back into it and drop back into it at any time. And as we finish this meditation, just to take a few more breaths and then gently move into our fingers and toes, our shoulders, our knees, our hips, just to gently awaken back to the space. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Thank you, everyone. I'd love
Thanks,
to.
Nikki.
Thanks, Ellen. If you'd like to unmute or share anything or put anything in the comment. Otherwise, if you need to move on with your day, and we'll see you here next week. I'll do it next week as well. We are in our school holidays. So the following week I won't, but next week I'll still be here.
Nikki.
Mm.
Lovely, Nikki. I always love the calmness that I get after your session. Thank you very much. I don't know why the hell my video is not working.
Thanks, Gail. I know sometimes Zoom befuddles us all. Thank you.
It
Thanks.
was amazing. You said about noticing the weather. I also noticed the sea in the background today more and the birds singing. It was lovely. Thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, you really see the weather at the coast there.
Yeah. And fun enough, tea is also our anchor. Every time we come back from a trip, tea is first thing that we do.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think these rituals are powerful. And I think they're powerful for
Very.
our youngsters too. Yeah, thank you.
Nikki. Now
Yes.
share a little bit about the full moon.
Yes, I'd love to hear, please.
So the full moon always happens when the moon is opposite the sun. So with the sun just having gone into Cancer, then the moon had just gone into Capricorn. And within a degree or two, it was sort of early days of Capricorn. And but Michael Lennox talks about, when we talk about having a blue moon, where there's 2 full moons in a calendar month,
Oh,
everybody says, oh, it's a blue moon, but
yes.
he says, which is dark, because it's not the moon doesn't listen to the Gregorian calendar. But he says what's happening now with this full moon now is we're going to go through at the end of the cycle. It'll be in the last degrees of Capricorn. So we're having 2 Capricorn full moons in a row.
Oh, how interesting.
It's unusual. It normally goes through, each cycle, it goes
it's a
into the next sign of the
different
zodiac. Whereas this time, so it was the solstice and the full moon and
and the blue
moving into
moon
Cancer, everything happened all at once. So
how interesting.
actually a blue moon.
And so, so what does
So
he
it's going to
say?
be, well, Capricorn is all about, climbing the mountain, having goals, doing things. So to have that energy for the whole moon cycle is terribly important. But unfortunately, Uranus is around having a party with everybody as well. So there's quite a bit of tumultuousness going on. So although you had this drive to climb the mountain, you're actually not going to get there because Uranus and Neptune is all making it very foggy. So we do the best we can.
Yeah, exactly. I can identify with that. How interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you
So
for sharing that.
you take comfort in the moon cycles. I go a little bit deeper, but it's very comforting when you think, oh, all right, that makes sense. Well, then it's not just me being crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thanks, Nikki. It was a lovely session.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much, Nikki.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone.